Hello, and welcome to the Mama Jack podcast. This week, we have another single mother on here. She is an old friend of mine from California, and her single motherhood is one of the most unique stories I've ever heard. She has a lot of great wisdom, and I just can't wait for you guys to hear the story. So, we're just going to jump right into it. Enjoy the interview. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay over here.
Yeah.
So, let's jump right into it.
Yeah.
So, the beginning of your journey, how did that happen? Were you in a relationship when you got pregnant? What did that look like for you?
Well, I mean, it's so funny because you get this idea when you're younger that just everything happens so easily. And then as you get older, you realize everything's a little trickier and it isn't as clear. But for me, my journey was I had decided when I was almost on the cusp of being 37 that I was going to freeze my eggs because I was like, how is it I have not met the man I'm going to marry at this age? Like, how is that possible? I'm clearly going to meet somebody soon. So I better have my eggs frozen because back then, like, and I say back then, it feels like it was such a long time ago. It was like everybody, not a lot of people were freezing their eggs. It was just becoming kind of popular. But it was like, look, if you're going to have a child over the age of 35, you should definitely freeze your eggs.
Yeah.
So I like really thought about it and hummed and hawed about it and like was figuring out like financially how to make that work. And again, this wasn't like a super popular thing at this point in time. So then I went and I did all like the hormones and that hell of the hormones of getting and procuring eggs. And afterwards, I just found out I had 3 eggs, and like rule of thumb is you have to have like 6 eggs per to make
Mhm.
a baby. And I was just devastated. And then I was like, well, I've got to go to a different doctor because clearly this isn't giving me my results. And through the other doctor, she said, well, you're gonna have to get we're going to have to make you embryos because you clearly are not a big producer of eggs. So that means you might even be infertile. So you need to we've got to make you embryos. And I'm like, what? She's like, so you've got to go find yourself a sperm donor. I'm like, wait, what? And so I had literally like 7 to 10 days to pick a potential like baby daddy.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And I was like, wait, this is not my life. Like, this is not like what? And I remember like I sent to all my closest friends, I was like, guys, here's my password for this like cryo bank. I'm like, go through and see if you like any of these guys. I sent it to like one of my stepsisters, and I sent it to like every one of my like close friends that I knew would like kind of like, you know, properly look. And of course, like, and there's like a saved like group, so you could go see your saved matches. And I was like, oh my God, no, 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 I don't like this one. It was so challenging. And so then my stepsister came across a profile and she was like, for some reason, like this guy popped out and I don't know, like for some, I just like, he seems like like not somebody you would go for, but I think he's like a really good like combination. And I'm like, um, hmm, okay. And I looked at him like, okay, yeah, he seems reasonable. Like somebody I would definitely date. Definitely not like me, but that's like a good thing. To have like balance in the universe.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna choose it. So then we got the sperm and I like called up the sperm bank. I'm like, I know you're not allowed to tell me what this guy looks like, but I need help because I'm like really freaked out. Anyway, I digress. It was like, so you chose him and we made embryos. We got something like 8 embryos. And I was like, okay, that's awesome. Like, I have 8 embryos. Okay, so I'm going to meet this great guy. And then how do I explain to the guy that I have like a donor embryo? Like, what?
Yeah.
Now I have like a whole freaking, okay. Because the funny thing is, I remember like feeling so insecure about like even getting my eggs frozen. And I was kind of like, well, I thought like, well, maybe guys would like to hear that because that means there's like no pressure in like getting like having a baby now. But it's
Yeah.
like totally the opposite, because if you actually are like going and freezing your eggs, that means like you're thinking about having a baby, even if it's like not tomorrow, it's like soon. And men are freaked out about like the idea of having a baby. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if they're like married, they're still freaked out. So if you're dating, you're out there and like a guy, you tell a guy you froze your eggs, they're like, oh yeah, like later, because it's just not sexy. Like, no. And so I had to kind of navigate first, like wanting to be open and sharing, but then like kind of withholding information. But then I had like the crazy, like double whammy of like, I have donor embryos, like confusing, right?
Yeah.
Especially like guys don't understand this concept. It's far too, and like, there's a
Yeah.
lot. It's like a lot of unpacking. And I was deeply insecure about the whole situation, because I was like, how am I going to navigate this? Like, how am I going to explain to a guy? I need to find a guy that's going to be okay with this. As you're listening to me talk about this and like navigating the dating world, and I was dating in Los Angeles, which is like a horrible place to date, right? It's like
Yeah.
dating in a city, right? And
Yeah.
I really wanted to be a mom since I was like, oh, I remember like just being like a 3-year old and 4-year old and having these dolls I carried around like that were my babies. And I was just always very maternal. I was certain I was going to have a lot of children. It was like definitely in my future. And suddenly I'm getting to this point where I'm like, I'm getting older and okay, like, well, when am I going to do this? And I haven't met the guy yet that I want to share the rest of my life with. No pressure. And then I just decided, okay, well, like, I'm I have to just, I'm not meeting somebody, and I'm gonna have to do this. I'm just gonna have to do it on my own. And
Oh,
because it's just like time was just not on my side. It was like one of these things where I'm like, I am cusping on like almost 40. I think I was like maybe maybe 39, about to be 40, possibly. I
mhm.
think I was like right at that age. And I'm like, okay, I want to have a kid. The
Mhm.
interesting thing in all of that is that, when I just focused solely on like, okay, this is what I want to do, I still had a lot of noise in the background about like, well, how are you going to date in the future? There's like a lot of weird focus on that. And like the dating, I think like women do get a little too caught up in that,
Yeah.
instead of just being very present in like where we are, and also knowing our value instead of expecting someone else to kind of fill that void. And like, like I had a trajectory of like, this is how my life had to be, and suddenly it wasn't happening like how I envisioned it, and I was expecting a person was supposed to come into my life and actually like help me find, like, get what I needed.
Yeah.
So then I decided, okay, I'm gonna hit the ground running. We're gonna just do implants, these embryos. Well, then I found out I couldn't carry a baby because I have endometriosis and it was just high risk. And so then I had to go the surrogate route. So
Wow. I didn't know
yeah,
any of this. This is a
yeah,
lot of like
a lot of
cool
info. I know. I
information.
mean,
Oh my
and
goodness.
yes, and so it was like crazy. I mean, first of all, the world, again, we have to remember the time when I was doing this, because my son is 3.5. So when I was doing this, like it took us like 2 years to actually get a baby. So think about that. Like, so that's like, so 3.5, so 5.5 years ago, almost 6 years ago,
Wow.
I was taking this journey. Now, this is before people were talking about surrogacy.
Yeah.
This is before, like, people were just getting comfortable with the egg freezing conversation.
Hmm.
This was like next level. Like, no one was talking about this stuff. It was like all the celebrities were doing it, like behind closed doors. And then it was just one of those things. It just like wasn't considered it was very taboo to even talk about. I have to say, like, I didn't know a single person that gone the like surrogate route. Um, and so that was like navigating a whole other process. So here I am, a single woman, sorry, single woman with donor embryo, with with the donor sperm, and somebody carrying my kid. That's not my body.
That's a
So
lot of changes, like,
it's a lot, but on
yeah.
top of that, it's also like I'm such a planner and thinking like, okay, well, how was I remember reading all these books, like how to explain to your child that, somebody else carried them and then the father is not the, like, I thought, oh my God, my child is coming into a world of chaos, not even knowing who they are, how they came here. And I remember talking to a psychologist who was like, listen, Shauna, like okay, I'm not just,
I can
you're
edit it out. It's
okay.
fine.
It doesn't, yeah. You're just bringing in a child who is completely wanted. Like those children that are looking for their fathers, those kids were not brought into the world like being wanted. They were actually abandoned and they were seeking a mother or father. And so you cannot compare yourself to having a child that is not wanted, because your child is completely wanted. And it's like you did everything in your power,
Yeah.
bent over backwards, to make this child come into your life.
Yeah.
Those children you're talking about are seeking out what they lost when they were younger.
Yeah.
So totally different. And when she put it that way, I was like, oh, ding, 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 ding. Like it all kind of like came together. And then I felt like more security around it.
Hmm.
I had a lot of people in my life that were not as supportive of my decision to do this, which is a big one. I think out of fear, a lot of fear based, right? Which is
Yeah.
always where these things come from. I had some family that were kind of like, my dad was like, what? You're going to have a child on your own? What? Like, And I remember I watched this really interesting documentary, and I watched it like a lot of times, like over maybe a period of like 3 or 4 years. And it's called, what was it? It was called First Comes Love. Wait, no, I think it's called First Comes Love. And it's this woman, she's like about to turn 40, lives in New York, and decides, have you seen it or have you heard about it?
I haven't, but I'll watch it now.
It's actually real, and this is wild because when I watched it, like I was like, oh, I don't know how she could ever do this, like having a baby on her own. And she told her whole family, and like her father was like, oh, this is not a good idea. And she had a lot of pushback, and this is, again, she was during the time where this was not popular. People were not going and having babies on their own. Like this was a really taboo idea. So like she was doing then, I was doing it definitely at a time it was still very taboo. I mean, nowadays, if you're going to do this and like you were doing it the way I'm doing it, there would be a lot more support in society, which is great. Like,
Yeah.
I think, whereas like I didn't tell a lot of people. I kept everything like very hush hush because I just didn't know like how people were going to receive what I was deciding to do for my freaking life. Like, what the hell, right?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of like stops and goes because we found out that the embryos I created, the second doctor that I went to, like she froze the embryos too quickly in the lab. So when we were using them, they were basically turning into icicles as we were using them. So we went through like 3 rounds of we'd like get kind of a positive pregnancy, but it would show up, but like within like 48 hours, it would go negative because it was just like hormones showing positivity.
Yeah.
So it was like the roller coaster of like, oh, a baby, no, a baby. And like, and having a surrogate, like I would say, like what's kind of amazing if you have a really good person you connect with as a surrogate, it's like, it's the most like intimate relationship you will ever have in your life.
Yeah. I can imagine.
This woman is like in love with your child just
Hmm.
as much as you are. And it's wild because you're in it together. Because, like, I'm sure, like, with your husband, you have 2 kids, right?
Yeah.
it's like your husband, obviously, I'm sure is like very involved in, you know, and like, oh, this is our child and like we're having a kid. But like when somebody's carrying your baby and like as a woman, like carrying your baby and you're like, I felt like I was carrying my baby too. Like it was
Yeah.
wild. Like this like hormone, like it's just otherworldly. I mean, imagine if your husband was inside your body carrying your baby. It's like that. And it's like, this really, really, you can't explain it. It's the most wild experience. And like, it's like a free fall experience because you're like, okay, I have to really trust that this is the right person to carry my baby. And it's like for her, it's the same thing. It's like a free fall for her too, right? So it's this really intimate, like out of nowhere, this person who is a complete stranger in your life, like you're sharing the home of your child inside this person's body. Like,
That's insane. How
think
did you
about,
pick her? How did you go through
oh
that
my
process?
God. Well, it's wild. So so because I had that failure with I just, that I went through 3 different fertility specialists. By the time I got to the third, I remember I said, look, like I've been told by the last one I can't, my last fertility specialist, like definitely can't get pregnant. And she was like, well, you know, I'll tell you honestly, and I don't really share this with many people. I myself had a surrogate for my third child because I couldn't carry. I had horrible, horrible pregnancies. My third child, I was like, I wanted another child, but I couldn't have another pregnancy. It like destroyed my life essentially.
Yeah.
Like I had a horrible pregnancy, and so I go, oh my God. So okay, yes, it was actually somebody like giving me an okay that it was okay to like go down this path. And it's like, but what does that look like? How do I find it? Of course, finding that is not an easy. It's like, so then what she said, she was like very lucky and had an amazing surrogate. And so I'm like, well, is she available? Like, well, actually, she's already, no, I literally said that. I mean, it's one of these things where you're like, you know, like who you would normally be, just like being, you know, I tend to kind of be, I'm not one of those people that like, you know, shares too many, tries to be too pushy or I try to be just kind of like low key. And in this case, I was like, okay, I need your surrogate. What can I get her number? And she's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, I'll talk to her, but she's not doing it anymore. But she just started her own agency. And I'm like, oh my God. I think this is like fate. Like has to be. Because I went through a bunch of these other companies and it was just like, it felt so impersonal. It didn't feel right. And so
Yeah.
she put me in contact with her surrogate. And I am her old surrogate, who is now a business owner and has her own surrogate company. And she's amazing. And
That's
she's
beautiful.
another
Tell
angel
me
in my
more.
life. She was an angel in my life. This
Yeah.
woman was. Well, and then to top it off, this woman who ends up becoming my agent looking for a surrogate, her best friend had just been going to all these retreats to try to maybe do surrogacy because she saw her friend, the one who's a business owner, be a surrogate. And she was like, I want to do that too. It's so amazing what you're doing. So she started to go to like all these like surrogacy, like forums and all this stuff. And so it so happened that her best friend ended up being my surrogate.
Nice.
Amazing, right? So
Yeah.
then I had this like really interesting dynamic because the doctor has this really tight relationship with her surrogate, who is now my agent, who is also the agent for her best friend, who is now my surrogate. So I had a very intimate, close, like experience, right?
Yeah.
And it was really cool and it was interesting. It was just a really fascinating experience. So during that time, like I remember I was still dating people because I guess that's kind of what you do. Like I used to date people all the time. That's like all I did. I feel like I could have made a career just dating people. It was ridiculous. It was such a waste of time. I don't know what I was doing to myself, but clearly I felt like I needed to date. It's like what I did my entire existence as an adult woman. So, and then I always get to that weird conversation that like, oh yeah, well, I have these like I think I told one guy that I was dating, like, I would let a surrogate carry my baby, and he was like, "What?" And we had been talking for a long time, and I hadn't told him. Yeah. I mean, it was weird, but it's okay. Like, whatever. So then I know it's just, um, so then my son is born, and and there was this moment at his birth right after my because like actually my surrogate almost died during
Dang.
giving birth. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was really intense. But what was amazing is like right after he was born, she we like looked at each other and like we just like I know right before okay, right when we knew she was like a 10 we knew she was fully dilated, and it was like we kind of like it was this like really weird like and like just you're kind of in endorphin land. I don't know what it was, but like I just like gave her a big hug, and it was like we knew it was time, and like she
Mhm.
kind of held each other, and then she like gave birth, and then all that chaos happened because she almost died, like very big
Oh
deal.
my God.
It was fine, thank God, thank God, thank God. And then I took the baby, my son, over to, we were in like the hospital where we had a room like right next to hers. So we're in our own, I was in my own room with him. She was next to us. And then I remember we went to her room. I went to her room with him.
Mhm.
And it was like, we just like looked at each other and we just started crying.
Oh,
Just said, "Thank you." Like, "Thank you so much.
like
Thank you so
what?
much."
That's like the best gift in the
I mean,
world.
it's the biggest, and I just, like, looked at her like I just there was no there are no words. There's just no fucking words for it.
Yeah.
Like, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," and she was crying, and she was like, "I love you, I love you." I'm like, "I love you, I love you," and, like, it was the most beautiful moment I have like one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had where like this person just like I don't know, like risked her whole life and her existence to like give me the best gift I will ever have in my entire life, which is my child. Like it is the most like intimate, like unexplainable, deeply connective spiritual experience. Like I don't even have words. Like I remember even that moment I cried about it for like months. And even when I talk to her now, it's like really, it's so intense. Like she feels like she knows things that are going on with my son,
Mhm.
even when I haven't told her.
Wow. I mean,
Wild.
it's
That's
I want because
wild.
they say like part of the child,
Yeah.
the DNA stays in the
Yeah.
mother's brain.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's so interesting because one of my friends who was like kind of thinking maybe having a baby or whatever, and maybe going like a donor route, like her doctor had said something along the lines, there's something like what is it called? There's a term for it where it's actually the person who carries the baby. So like even if somebody has like a donor egg and a donor sperm, that child takes on the DNA, part of the DNA of the person who carries
Mhm.
the baby. I mean, I forget what it's called. It's like some type of like geno, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
Uh, and I'm like, what? Because he will literally be going through something like just, and it can be something really weird, like he's having tummy problems or whatever. And she will reach out to me and be like, is there something going on with him? Like, I feel like, is his stomach bothering him? And I'm like, what? How did you know that? Or she's like, yeah, I've been having a lot of dreams about him recently. Is something going on with him? I'm like, yeah, actually, XYZ happened. And it's like this really interesting thing. I'm like, wow. And yeah, I mean, it's yeah, life is amazing. Science is like can be just miraculous. But a human body is like, what?
Yeah.
Amazing. So so then, you know, my friend, she had driven with me to from Los Angeles to San Francisco where my son was born, because we had to go to where my surrogate was
Yeah.
in San Francisco. And so we were kind of waiting for the delivery. He's born, and then we drove back home. I drove in my car back home, got home, and I was like, how am I going to do this? Like, I was running on zero sleep.
Yeah.
I kind of just like, before, when I was preparing for him to come, I like had all these lists, and I was reading every book and every blog and I was like trying to gather and like eat up all the information I could. So I like knew exactly what I was going to be feeding him, how many times, like everything I had planned to a T.
Yeah.
Of course, as you know,
Yeah.
having your children, none of that. I have like a box
Yeah.
of like emergency things. Didn't use any of them. Nothing. Spent so much money like making sure I had every little like swaddle or everything, and I swear half of them still like have tags on them today. Like, no, God, and I didn't, and yeah, and so that, you know, it just kind of hit the ground running, trying to figure it out as I go, trying to like look up like how to give my baby their first bath,
Mhm.
all of that. And so I was very fortunate because as a gift, my mom gifted me with having a night nurse.
Nice.
I know. So that was amazing. And I say to anyone, I'm like, look, shore up all your money so you can just have somebody for just a couple days or something, just
Yeah.
so you like sleep, because sleep is the most important thing you can have in your life.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I had that help, which was amazing. So I could kind of like have somewhat of like a rational mind, but like all day long, it was just me with my baby. And then when she left, when my night nurse left, I remember just like having this like enormous fear that I was going to die and that like no one was going to find my child, and like what was going to happen, because if, you know, I'm changing his diaper and let's say like I have like an embolism, I just like, you know,
Yeah.
thought these things and I just flat out die, who's going to know? Like that's the scary shit, right? Like who's going to know? Because there's no one checking in on me. I live in a big city. I live in a condo. I don't have like friends right nearby. I don't have
Yeah.
any family nearby. It was so, I like didn't sleep some nights because I was scared I was gonna die.
Man.
I mean, it was almost like I had PTSD, but I didn't have a baby. You know what I mean? Like, but or like, I'm sorry, postpartum. But
Yeah.
I didn't, you know. But I had this severe, debilitating fear. Like, if something happened to me, who's going to take care of my kid?
Yeah.
And I actually like overwhelmed like my days as a mother. Like that fear was like so crippling to me. And you know, my child, like he was not, he had a lot of tummy issues, and so like, you know, that witching hour, like my kid screamed like starting 4 o'clock until like the night nurse would show up at night, and I would like hand him over and he
Yeah.
would scream and scream. So I mean, I just spend all my days just like holding my hand close to him, because he wasn't like a baby that like wanted to lay on me and snuggle on me, or like he just wasn't that baby. So I
Mhm.
was always like kind of holding him close, but like he was crying. And
Oh.
so it was like, it was an interesting thing, right? Because I was like, is this just like what mothers experience? Like, is this just normal?
Well,
And
I have a
my normal,
question
but did
for
you
you.
experience that? Yes.
I have a
Yes.
question for you. So,
Yeah.
whenever he came out and you were there,
Yeah.
how did that feel for you? Because as a mom, like I birthed both of my children, okay?
Yeah.
And there are so many hormones. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I believe in like energy and shifting
Yeah.
back and forth. And I'm wondering if, like, they say, like, even if you work hard enough, like, you can pump and breastfeed, even if you have a surrogate, like stuff like that, because your
Yeah.
hormones will. So I'm wondering if like how did you feel? Because when you're pregnant, you're like, okay, you physically feel it coming, right?
Yeah.
But you had a surrogate. So it's like, how did that feel? Like, was it like a wow moment? Like, oh my God, I have to take care of this little being? Or like, what was that moment like for you?
Right when he like actually was born.
Yes.
It was so surreal. He immediately, as soon as he came out, I like the doctor handed him to me, and like I literally put him immediately on my chest,
Mm-hmm.
and like umbilical cord,
Mm-hmm.
and I sat on a chair with him, and he was like, I immediately was just like, it was an interesting thing, and I don't know if you experienced this with your babies, but like I was like, "Oh my god, he doesn't look like the way I thought he was gonna
Yeah.
look." It was like, he looks different, and it was like, "Oh, wow, like, this is my child," and my kid was, like, 11.4 pounds,
Dang.
and we thought he was gonna be, like, maybe 9, right?
Oh my
If we would
goodness.
have known he was gonna be this big, she would have definitely had to have, a cesarean.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, this was a huge child, and I remember, like, I was holding him, and he was, like, lifting his neck and, like, turning his neck forward, like, "How are you this strong? Like, you're, like, so it's, like, unbelievable," and I just was, like, holding him, and I was talking to him, I'm like, "Oh, baby, I've been waiting for you for so long.
Oh.
You're, like, the love of my life, and I love you so much, my baby," and he's, like, he definitely knew my voice because I was giving her, like, I had this thing called, like, belly buds,
Mm-hmm.
and so I would like talk to him every day in the belly buds, and I'd play music for him, and like he'd listen to my dogs barking. So as soon as like he heard my voice, he immediately like knew me because like I was would spend hours talking to him every day and playing him like hours of music into her like right on top of her tummy.
Yeah.
And so I did think about the whole because I was told with the breastfeeding that you could do it, but you would have to take there was some type of medicine you would
Yeah.
need to do. And I was like, you know what? I learned from my experience, like doing my egg pulls and like the embryos and all of that, like the hormones were just so tragically difficult for me. And
Yeah.
I was like, no, synthetic hormones freak me out
Yeah.
across the board. Like I'm like so freaked out that I ever took birth control in my life. But I digress, like no big deal. That's
Mm-hmm.
over. But you know, hormones, like synthetic hormones are like no joke. But I think I don't I wonder if it would have been more, I don't know because like even my son now, he's he's very particular about like affection and how he gives affection, and he doesn't just give it. So that's just been the way, that's like kind of his personality.
Yeah.
So I feel like you know, you're kind of born a certain way, and I think it's like it just becomes more of you as you grow. And so I don't know if it would have been different if I would have breastfed him. I'm not sure. I definitely was like would have loved to have the experience of doing that because I'm sure if I was like a mom who had, I would have never said this before having my son, but I know I'm one of those moms that like if I were had the ability to breastfeed, I would probably want to breastfeed him until he was like 5.
It's hard.
You know,
It's
you're
hard to
kind of like
stop.
you can see like how it's so like nurturing
Yeah.
and so connective, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like and it's not about milk, but it's about feeling secure and safe in the world, and like you just want to cocoon your babies forever.
Yeah.
And so I would have been totally into like being like breastfeeding for
I'm
a very
I'm
long time.
wondering if your body didn't maybe go through a little bit of postpartum depression because they even say that dads can get it. So
Oh well,
like it has to be there has to be something like that. You're a woman, you know what I
oh yeah,
mean? So I'm sure you might have even had a little bit of postpartum depression when you brought him back or just like because your body wasn't going through all the hormones
no,
like after you have a baby there are like mommy hormones that kick in.
totally.
So there had to have
Absolutely.
been something like that with you. I'm wondering if you had it or you didn't, because like for me waking up with my kids, it was like an automatic, like I woke up before they woke up to eat, like the second before. Like they didn't start crying until I was already it was like some weird intuitive thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yes.
I'm wondering if a little bit of that didn't like come off in you, because I mean,
Like,
women are just so cool. Like the way everything works is
oh,
just so cool.
right? I
But
mean, 100. And I think what it was really interesting for me, and like it's so weird because like today, I don't even talk about him like being. I feel like I carried my own baby.
mhm,
Like I really feel like I gave birth to him. I carried him. Like I do not have. I do not connect him with a surrogate. Like we're having this conversation now,
mhm,
but like I never talk about that ever
yeah,
because to me, isn't even like my mind doesn't even go there. I believe like he was in my body. I feel that connected to him that I'm like, I feel like he was a part. He's a part of me. And I mean, like this is like going like a completely different direction, but like I had seen like multiple like psychics like when I was like younger, and every psychic I ever saw said there was like a little boy who was waiting to be born. He was like waiting, his soul was waiting for me. And I was always like, no, my first baby's gonna be a girl. Because you know, women think like that. And I was like, I don't think so. And then it was like this, everybody was like, there's this boy, and he really wants to be born. And he really, you're gonna have this incredible connection with him. And suddenly when I find out that, oh, I guess I missed a part of the story. When all the embryos didn't work, I had those 3 eggs from the beginning, and there's 1 egg. Out of 3 eggs, my 1 egg became my baby. So that's kind of wild because that's like really rare. So that was kind of amazing. But
mhm,
yeah, I feel like, I mean, I feel like I've known him for like hundreds and hundreds of years and thousands or whatever. Like there's no, where he begins and I end, and where I end he begins. Like there's no, it doesn't, we are like soul connected. And so it was just kind of getting him to me
yeah,
was where we were, you know.
yeah. That's so cool. That's so
So cool.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So we left off before at your night nurse and when she left. So
Yeah.
how old was he whenever you didn't have
Oh
her
my God.
anymore?
Let's see. I like, I had her for like 3 months, maybe.
Mhm.
He was supposed to have her for 1 month. And then I was like, I can't let her go. I can't let her
Yeah.
go. I can't be alone. I
Yeah.
can't do it. I can't do it. And I remember crying, like begging, please, please, please. And so eventually, there was a time I had to say goodbye to her. I asked her if she would just like live with me forever, and she said no. Um, and so I remember like the last day, it was like right, I think it was like on the first of like January. So like I see, my son was like almost 4 months. Because wait, he was born August, September, October, November, December. Okay, it's almost 5 months. And and I cried and cried and cried, and like woke up the next morning crying, crying that she wasn't coming back. It was really, really hard to let go of her. And then because that was when, you know, I had like the fear of like death.
Yeah.
Um and that haunted me for many months to follow. Maybe probably still to this day. But what was really interesting is I was like very proactively like joining all these mommy groups in Los Angeles. And so I was in like I was in maybe like 4 different mommy groups because I really wanted, it was interesting because I'm an older mom. So most of the moms were significantly younger than me. In fact, they all were. I'm sorry. All of them were. I was like 42 when my son was born.
Yeah.
And so all the moms in my mommy and me group, they were like 30, between the age of like 29 to 35. And I think 35 is maybe pushing it. I'd say like 34.
Mhm.
And talk about like a huge age gap. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that was something that was kind of interesting. Like my son was the same age as their babies, and they're like 15 years younger than me. Um, and then of course being a single mom. in these mommy groups, there was not a single woman who was a single mom.
That's so nuts to me.
Which is wild, because in Los Angeles, what do you think
Yeah.
would be the case? There'd be like at least somebody who's divorced.
Yeah.
No, everybody was freaking married, or like nobody was even divorced. I mean, yes, there was like one woman who was like 29 and her husband was like 69, and like that was extreme, but I was like definitely the Lone Ranger.
Wow.
And that was kind of like even a little isolating for me too, because it was like these people I couldn't relate to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was really interesting. I was like, what the hell? Like I do not connect with. And so we'd spend like part of the group, because these are all like formed groups by companies. And so you show up and you all sit down, you talk about what you did this week, whatever. Everyone goes around, talks about their experiences. And then there's like a topic we're focusing on for the day. And in all of my groups, there was like a focus on maintaining your relationship after having a baby, making sure like your husband doesn't feel like,
That's
you're only. It was, I swear to God, like it was a conversation, like, and I thought that was my moment. I'm like, oh shit, I'm so lucky I'm like a single mom, because dude, I can't, like, I can only handle one human right now, and the kid needs me to exist. I cannot imagine having to take care of another fucking man right now. Like, I used to spend my whole life like taking care of men, boyfriends, guys I was in relationships with. And then I'm like, oh no, I have to take care of this child. I'll be damned if I can even give a breath to anybody else.
Were you working?
No,
Okay.
I was like full-time mommy in it.
Okay. Or
I
do
was
you work now?
no, no. So
Okay.
I had worked, and then I was like, I decided that, I kind of like went through like a stage of going, well, do I want to hire somebody, which would actually cost, I mean, I would be almost breaking even if I like hired somebody full time and was working full time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to be with my kid, so I have to make this work. I have got to figure out like a way to make this work. And I moved out of the city,
Hmm.
which of course made life a lot easier
Yeah.
when I moved out of Los Angeles. But I wanted really to be with my kid, and I didn't want to be, I mean, we work in professions that are like really demanding emotionally, time, you know,
Yeah.
I, I don't know, like, are you working now? Like,
I don't
uh,
work. I mean, other than this podcast, I'm a stay-at-home mom, but my husband, I mean, he's a first AC, so
so,
I know the hours. Yeah.
the hours are insanity, right? And so it was like, I remember just like all I did was like work, and I'd be like gone, working for 12
Yeah.
hours, go home and like sleep for a few hours, then wake up and do it again. And it was just so unfulfilling to me. Honestly, it really wasn't. It was not a fulfilling thing, but I found so much fulfillment like mothering, and I really wanted to be with my kid all the time. Also, there's like a lot of fear involved in that too, because I always felt like if I wasn't with him, like something bad could happen to him. So that's a whole other conversation. So I'm kind of unpacking some of my emotional,
Well, that's a lot of people feel that way. Like
yeah,
it took me forever to find a babysitter for Kennedy. Then we moved here and I found one woman out of like so many people, and it's just it's hard. It's hard to trust somebody with your baby, especially you worked so hard to get this kid.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you did so many things for so many years, like years
yeah,
and
yeah,
years of your life, like I
yeah.
totally understand that. So, how do you, if you don't mind me asking, how do you maintain living right now?
So I'm very fortunate. Like, I've always had savings and
Mhm.
investments. So I've always kind
Nice.
of like, and I was lucky enough that I was able to like sell the place I was living in Los Angeles, and like,
Nice.
and move. So that was great.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've been lucky. I've
Mhm.
been very lucky and fortunate to be able to do what I do full time being a mom. Like, that's a big lucky situation for me. Um,
So you're a
there,
single stay-at-home mom.
yeah.
So how is that?
So I live like mommy land. Like, I
Yeah.
really do. I live in that like that world. Like, it's wild because anything that I used to just like, was very like do a lot of social things all the time, and now I'm kind of like, I don't know, like I want to be. It's definitely a challenge to try to be a little more like have more social experiences and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But then at the end of the day, I'm always so tired that I'm like, well, I just want to kind of rest and like watch a movie. And I don't really have a lot of energy to be like social.
Yeah, how does that feel though? Like, do you ever get, because like, for instance, it's rare, but
Yeah.
like when my husband's home, sometimes I want to just freaking run. Like I
Yeah.
literally
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I literally just had a mental breakdown because I'm a stay-at-home mom here with two kids,
Oh, yeah.
PTSD and trauma from the past, not dealing with shit. And so, like, does that ever affect you? Like, just being all like with your kid all the time, nobody like coming to relieve any of that ever? Like, do you sometimes get a babysitter and have time for yourself? How?
I mean, so when I've had a babysitter, I'm always in the house. Like, so they'll maybe be in like another room.
Mhm.
Um, no, I would say it is definitely challenging for me.
Yeah.
I have moments where I'm like, I just need a beat. Like, I need somebody to just take a minute so I can like and just be with my kid so I can just like maybe groom my dogs. I mean, this is how like hard it is.
Yeah.
I can't, you have two, I have one. Um, I mean, having one child, and at this, I mean, the
Oh,
our
my kid's 3.5 too. I think they were born a couple weeks apart. So yeah, Kennedy, he's 3.5. So I totally know what
okay,
you're
and it's
doing
like
right
a
now.
totally in like they need you 100%, like,
Yep.
then they're all going through, but like everything's like so extreme. You're like living in like, let me talk to you like a child, like let's do this whole thing so everyone feels comfortable, and it's constantly navigating like how I'm parenting and like, am I making the right choices for my son? Like that's all I think about now.
Yeah.
So it's like now I kind of would like to, now it's trying to get like this, trying to find a balance of like we're in like a good situation, like let's get everything situated even more, and then I would like to just kind of try to like find somebody I could feel safe enough to leave. Yeah, I'm working on that, trying to find a little balance. But it's really challenging. Don't even know who I was before I was a mom. Like
Yeah.
I'm kind of like trying to figure that person out. And honestly, and I don't know if you can relate to this because you were saying like you have some, trauma from your past, and I do as well. And I think I've found a lot of peace in myself from being a mother.
Mhm.
Like I feel it's like healed a lot of wounds
Mhm.
from my past, which is very interesting. It brought up things, but it also has made me kind of have more value on myself because I see like how valuable I am. Whereas I think before, I think I didn't put as much of a value on myself. I was always looking to be affirmed by people
Yeah.
in my life. And I like my son's kind of taught me just mothering him and how valuable I am as a human, which was an interesting experience because I don't think my whole life I've ever felt that. I've never really felt that from my family, from my anybody that I was like important. And suddenly I'm like in this position where like, wow, like I am important and I see my value in myself.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh my God, like who was I before then? So all that time that I had spent trying to find somebody to like affirm me was such bullshit because I'm like, why didn't you have this in yourself, And so then it also makes me really focus on how I mother my son and, really affirming him just like as a person and whoever that is, like expecting him to always know that like whatever he is and whatever he wants to do, like I completely support. Just like having this really free, open space of just love, acceptance, like understanding healthy boundaries, but always knowing like you have a safe place in the world. And I don't think I ever had that as a kid.
Mhm.
And so I kind of am like learning love through my son. Is that, I mean, does that make sense? And I don't know
Yeah.
if you can connect to this at
No,
all.
that's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, for me, because of how bad my postpartum depression was, I was more like, it was like clouded for a
Oh,
long time.
yeah.
So, like, I just released an episode on this, my healing journey, and I described
Mm,
it. And I mean, I always felt like they needed me, right? But with my depression, it was like, oh, it's too much. Oh, I can't handle this. Oh my God. So, like, I got my help. I'm on my journey, right? And there was a moment with my son not too long ago that he said something and my heart just like exploded and I almost started crying. I was like, oh my God, 3.5. He's like 3.5 because it was only like a month or two ago. And I was like, this is what a mother's love feels like. Like, I just, like, I loved my kids, don't get me wrong, but
yeah.
that wholesome, like, they're my
Yeah.
babies. I can't live without them. Like, I felt like I couldn't live without them. But now it's so different that because I've lifted that dark cloud. So like very
Wow.
recently I felt that. And I actually felt a lot of guilt around that. Um,
Sure.
because, why didn't I help myself earlier? Like, but don't look at the past, but it's like, but I know how you feel. Like now it's like I love being there for them. When he's upset, it's like
Mm.
I'm mom. Like I know what to do,
Yeah.
I know how
Yeah.
to treat. He trusts me. He comes to me. Like I'm
Yeah.
his person and I love that now. Whereas like before with my anxiety and everything, it was a lot different. But recently, yes, I totally understand how you feel.
I
So,
mean, I like one thing that somebody is like I have like heard multiple times is like, I noticed like when my son was like with other people, he'd be really just different. Like he'd be really chill behaviorally and everything. And
mhm.
then he was around me like wild monster. And I was like, what is that about? And it's like, no, because he feels like he can be like his authentic self with you and that you aren't going to judge him. Like he
Yep.
feels with you. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I was like, okay, like he feels safe with me. He's being a total brat right now, but like, look, like he's feeling safe and like we're gonna deal with this, but this is why he's behaving this way. But yeah, I mean, I think as women, we're always so hard on ourselves. Like we always think we're not doing something right or like we're somehow like missing something. And I mean, you even blaming yourself for not getting help earlier. I mean, a lot of times we don't even know we're in a cloud. Like
Yeah.
we could be living there and existing with cloud around us, and we
Mhm.
don't know that there's no like sun cutting. We just know it doesn't feel right, and we're sad, but we just kind of we push through, and that's just like how we have been trained in society as humans, and also just like biologically we're trained to like be nurturers, to hunker down, figure it out, push through. There's a lot of pressure to like do it all and be it all for everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody. You're like keeping your family afloat emotionally. You always feel that way. You feel like you're responsible for everything, which is so onerous.
So, what do you feel is the hardest part about being a single mother up
Mm-mm.
until this point?
That's the hardest thing about being a single mother. I mean, I would say there's moments where it'd be really nice, like, somebody who had the emotional investment in my son
Mhm.
to the level that I do, right? Like it's just different. Like so the way I'm sure your husband feels about your children, there is like a little bit of an intense level of like devotion to the child. Now, of course, that doesn't. I mean, people are married all the time, and like
Mhm.
the father isn't that connected or the mother is not that connected. So there are the moments where I'd be like, okay, somebody that can like I can release at the end of the day, like just be like, okay, hey,
Yeah.
you got him for a minute, so I can go like take a shower,
Mhm.
like those types of things. But at this point, I'm kind of like we're in such a cycle of like I'm not depending on anyone in any way or expecting anyone And so I think it's like those big decisions where I really want to like know, am I making the right decision? Is this right for him? Is this not right for him? Because when you deal with a child who has like different, isn't maybe following the same path as some children,
Mm-hmm.
you have to, that takes extra navigation.
Yeah.
For me, like, following my son's path, which is different than some other a lot of children his age. That is an extra. It's an extra stressor, like an extra thing to think about all the
Yeah.
time. So it's
Yeah.
like what exists normally is like truncated. It's like so much more when you're navigating like these other things. So I think in those moments, it's like, again, it kind of boils down to like when I was saying earlier about like that fear of like, oh my God, like what if I get sick in the middle of the night and I have to go to the hospital? Who's going to take care of my kid? That's
Mm-hmm.
where I struggle, is in like those rare moments where you're scared about being alone,
Yeah.
like making sure your kid is okay. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where I think that's the hardest, is that little moment where you feel you can't be there, or there might be a chance you're not there.
Yeah.
That to me, I think, is the scariest thing and hardest thing about it.
Okay, so are you planning on dating again?
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I'm really excited about dating again, because like who I am now, I wouldn't date any of the guys I've dated before.
Yeah, I was gonna say your perspective
I'm
probably
super
changed a lot.
excited. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really into it, because for me, it's like I'm looking for someone who's actually going to be like somebody who's like, what quality do you bring into my life? Like, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Before it was more about like, how can I find that right person to give me a baby? Well, I got him,
Yeah.
right? I got my
Mm-hmm.
baby. So I don't have that need. And when you don't have that need, you're doing it because you want to connect versus a need. And so I was coming from a place of need, lack, needing to fill a void that has been, I don't have that feeling anymore, which I think is really exciting to date. Like, I'm really looking forward to, like, in the future, going on a date and meeting somebody and just like actually deciding, like, do I even want to see this person again? And like not having to think of it in any other way but that.
Well,
And like,
and you're deciding for two people now, right? Because
oh
if
yeah. Oh, please. It's like now it's like the guys I've dated in the past would not even make it past like probably 30 minutes on the phone. The guys I
yeah,
dated for months. Like it would not even happen today, because like I'm a protector of my child. That always comes first. And it's like, and now it's like, what do you bring to our lives?
mm-hmm.
It's a whole different level. So like the bar is raised so high in such a good way, in such a healthy way. And
Yeah,
so I love that. So I'm kind of excited to like, meet somebody, and I know I will. It's just like, when is it, who is going to be that right person? What is that going to look like? And when is it going to happen? I don't know. But that's kind of the fun part too. Like, I'm
yeah,
not in a hurry to do anything. Like
yeah,
before, it was like this kind of hurry of like, you got to have pregnant. You've got to have your baby. You're like 40 years old. Like, you have to do it now. Like, there's just so much pressure for
mm-hmm.
women. And now I'm like, I see my friends that are like really struggling, because they're like, oh, I want to, there's this pressure to have children, pressure to get married, so much pressure. And I'm like, do what you need to do, get what you want. I always say to my single friends, go get what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Do not wait for anyone to give you what you want. Go get it, and you will find a connection down the road when it's the right time. But get what you need for yourself,
Yeah,
always. And that would have been my advice to my younger self. That now I've learned. Go get it, and then that's where you'll find fulfillment, is through yourself. And I just didn't. I wasn't able to put that together. It sounded good, but I wasn't able to live that experience. So until I decided to make this really big, bold decision which was so scary. Making the decision to be a single mom was really scary and
Yeah.
intimidating.
Yeah.
And
Well, your
it was a lot.
story is so unique too.
Yeah, I mean, whatever is gonna be helpful, and also just like this experience of creating these embryos that I found out actually, didn't even work. And like I put a lot of like energy and hope that these embryos were gonna give me a baby. And I actually got to a point where I was like, okay, it looks like I'm gonna have to get donor eggs, donor sperm, surrogate. Like how like what is that going to look like for me?
Yeah.
Like how is that going to look like for my child in the
Mhm.
world? And navigating that and having like really like those moments of like figuring that out and really pushing through the fear to where now I'd be like, yeah, get yourself like a donor egg, get yourself a donor sperm. Who cares? It's your baby. Like
Mhm.
you then realize souls are souls are souls. It's just like they're just souls that come through portals of the human body, right? We're
Mhm.
just souls connected to each other.
Yeah.
Like you and I met how many years ago?
Yeah. A long time. I don't even
Right.
know, like
And we
13.
met, I mean, it was forever ago and it was through one person,
Yeah.
right? Who I don't even know now at
Mhm.
all. I don't know that person, but like we had that very brief moment in time. Who would have thought that many years later we'd be sitting here and I would be sitting in San Diego, you'd be sitting at home, and we would be just sitting there having a conversation about like motherhood.
I
Like
know.
really, that's how wild and amazing the universe is.
Yep.
So it's just beautiful. So to me, after you get all the technical crap out of the way, it's all about like energy, like you were saying, like that spiritual moment when your baby is born and the connecting and like you were saying, like, yeah, well, you probably did have like some, postpartum, because in a weird way, I do feel like I carried my child, which is so strange, but I really feel that. So it's
Mhm.
like I just feel like he was always been in my orbit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's always been with me.
Yeah.
So there's no difference. So
You had a very unique single mother experience, you know?
I know. Yeah. Well, and you know what? Another thing I wanted to share with you is that one thing I found that I've learned through, because I used to I realized there is like, people create stigmas around things. That's just like the human experience, right? Because it makes people feel safe in the world, right? You
Yeah.
create a construct and you're like, I'm going to identify this person as this because of XYZ and it makes me feel safe, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So I realized like by telling people like I'm a single mom and like kind of like leading with that, I found a lot of like, I didn't feel as much of a connection with people when people thought I was a single mom, because I think in a weird way, women are like, oh my God, that seems so overwhelming. Like, I can't relate to that. It sounds so scary that it's almost like I felt like so much resistance from people, or I would be treated with like kind of kid gloves, like treated differently
Mhm.
because I was a single mom, which I never wanted. I'm like, I'm just a woman who had a baby and I'm just like you guys. Like,
Yeah.
don't treat me any differently. So then I honestly wouldn't even tell people, like, when I started meeting moms, like through my sons, if my son was like in a school, I would never even talk about being a single mom or anything, because I just didn't want that to get in the way of like me just having a human experience with another person about a baby. Like, I'm a mom, you're a mom, you've got a kid, I've got a kid. Like, we have that in common. Like, I don't need
Yeah.
to talk about, unless you're a single mom and you want to talk about that.
Yeah.
I just felt like sometimes leading with these things can be interesting. And sometimes I have noticed some people, like, that's how they want to identify. They want their experience and the way they're perceived in life to be about, I'm a single mom,
Mhm.
versus like, I'm a mom.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's all about choice and how people want. And there's a lot of people that actually they want to be solely focused on the fact that they're a single mom.
Mhm.
Like, for me, that didn't feel comfortable to me. Like, I wanted to feel like a we versus a they
Mhm.
situation. Like, we're in it. And I realized, like, even through my son, the best way in life is always just like to never lead with like, it don't lead in a way where people are going to have certain preconceptions.
Yeah.
I know that sounds, it does, it sounds so muddled what I'm saying, but I think it's really important, like just to kind of exist, be yourself, but don't let labels prevent you from living your full life, because you are exactly the same as every other person. Your experience might be different, but we're all the same.
Yeah.
So if you lead with I am different, people will treat you like you're different.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you want to be treated differently.
Yeah.
I don't. I always like to feel like part of the group. Like I want to be a part of a collective, And
Yeah.
so that's kind of how I've like led my journey, is like in motherhood, is like, you know, never really hyper focusing on being a single mom, but embracing it. And when people ask me about it, I'm like, yeah, because it's actually been the one that there's really great things about being a single mom. Like I call all the shots. And
Yeah.
if you're a control freak like I am, like you like to call the shots. Like
Yeah.
I like to be in control of everything.
Yeah.
So it definitely feeds that thing, which is not necessarily a good thing. But I kind of am like in control of like any decision I want to make, like how everything is like my decision.
Mm-hmm.
So I decide everything. I don't have to sit there and decide. I also don't have to take care of a relationship right now, which
Yeah.
I think would be really hard. And I only have one kid, but I can't imagine if I were married now and I had to manage another relationship. It would be really challenging, I think, for me right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I
That's
need
an
somebody to
interesting
come to the table.
perspective. That
Yeah,
really is.
it, because I know it to be true. I think marriage is like the hardest thing you ever do in your life. I know motherhood is really hard, but I think like coexisting with another adult, they've had like totally two different lives like before you came together, like coexisting and growing with somebody, that's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. It
You have to
is.
keep it like, and when you're a mother and you're trying to just keep, like, you're a full-time mom,
Mm-hmm.
two kids, you also want to make sure your husband's happy and that he's taken care of, and like managing, that's a lot. And
Yeah.
I don't know, like that is like, whew, seems that's like very heavy for me.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's so, I mean, I
I am
just
like
love your
impressed. So,
perspective on it.
well, but
Like,
it's just so funny because like people are like, how do you do it? And I'm like, girl, how do you do it? Like you're
yeah.
taking care of a relationship. Like you have to make sure, like you make sure that your relationship is nurtured and fed and cared for, and you can grow your relationship. And you're like, meanwhile, like just making sure that your kids are dressed and that like maybe they brush their teeth, and like you're just maybe took a shower that day, maybe if you're lucky. But then you're like having to like make sure another adult human is like also taken care of. That's a lot. It's like a
Yeah.
lot. There's a lot of expectations. Like I can have a dirty house and I don't have to have somebody else coming in and like going, why are there dishes in the sink? This is a
Yeah.
mess. Or like having to make sure like I prepare dinner for like an adult. Like I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Right? Like I could just like go to sleep and like eat a bowl of rice and like watch a reality TV show and not talk to anybody.
Yes.
You can't do that when you're married. Like or like partnered. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can literally don't have to talk to anybody. Watch a stupid reality TV show that no one would ever want to watch, especially a man. And I could like sit there and doze out and watch like 90 Day Fiance for an hours if I wanted to at night. I don't have to have sex with anyone, like unless I want to. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of pressure in being like partnered.
Yeah.
So I always like give like props to like the married women out there.
That's so hilarious. I mean, I love it. I'm in love with all of this because
It's
it's such a different perspective than what I
yeah.
thought I was going to get. Like,
Well,
it's,
because that's what I saw in my mommy and me groups. Like these women are saying, like, yeah, my husband like feels like I don't spend enough time with him. I'm like, girl, you just gave birth a month ago and
yeah.
you're feeding your baby and your husband to have sex with you and you don't feel like having sex. And like one of the moms is saying to another mom, sometimes you just have to push through. Even if it doesn't feel good, you just have to
Oh,
like,
man.
oh my God. Like this is my worst nightmare because then all these women who are like very affluent women, like they have a lot of money and like their husbands do. They have to like, they're worried that the men are like gonna go like one woman said, well, I've got to keep my man happy, like he might leave me for his secretary.
Oh
I
my
mean,
God,
there,
that's
so
so
imagine
sad.
being a mother and then also worried that your husband, who's insanely wealthy and around a lot of young girls all the time, and here you are pregnant and you're in too much pain to have sex with him, but you're going to force yourself to have sex with him because he might leave you or cheat on you.
That's
Okay, think about
insane.
that reality. I didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
I was just making sure I slept at night and tried to like, exist as a human. I just wanted to make sure my son made it through every day.
Yeah.
And I actually made it through every day. Like I couldn't get into the minutia of managing a relationship with an adult or worried that I wasn't nurturing him when I'm trying to like take care of a baby. I just didn't know how people did it. So that is like it's like a totally experience. Like I don't know how you do it. Like I'm like, how do you do it? Like, how do you do it? And yeah, like I can't do that. Like the New York's talking about when are you gonna date? I'm like, well, I'm really busy now to date. It would have to be like when I could like, go away and like have like a glass of, have like a martini
Yeah.
and chill out and like talk to some guy and like have fun and then go home. But I couldn't take him home. And like that's not what I want to do. Like
Yeah.
be on my time. But you see, there's a control thing. It's on my time.
Hmm.
You're like full time, like all around. You're like wife, mama, wife, mama,
Hmm.
trying to do your podcaster. You're doing it all. I mean, that's a lot. Like
Hmm.
I'm like just mommying it, but like that's kind of big. Taking care of another
Of
human,
course.
adult human, it's like a big thing. A relationship is so much work. So I think that's one thing I think single women like need to like that really want to have babies. I'm like, dude, have your kid because relationships are really hard and you can get that when you want it. But like focus on getting what you want.
Yeah.
Focus on that. And don't wait for a man to come like just to give you that because that doesn't mean you're still gonna have him. Like you might not want to, have sex with him and he might leave you for his secretary.
Yeah.
That does happen.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, all the time. So I don't have the workload of managing another adult aside from myself.
Well, that is,
It's a different perspective.
it is, but it's so like it just opened my mind up to so much many more things. Cause yeah, like you said, I'm thinking, single mom struggling, to work and keep everything together. And your perspective is like, I'm a mom. Like I'm doing it, you set yourself up before it the
Yeah.
right way. You set yourself up
Yeah.
before, So like,
Well, and I was older. So it's like
yeah,
if we're much younger and doing this, it'd be a very different thing. Like
yeah,
being an older mom, I actually highly recommend it because you have the patience, you have the interest in like, watching a child grow. Like when you're young, you want to have so many more experiences. I always say to like people, like women, try to get that out of your system. Like, go do it. You're going to do it again when you have your kid. But like, all those things you want to do, just do them. Like, go travel, do your thing. You'll have your
mhm,
kid like when it's the right time. But like, I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. Does that
yeah,
make sense? Like,
yeah,
so, I mean, my experience is like coming to the table as an older mom is like, I highly recommend it
hmm,
for people mothering, in your 30s at least. Like doing it in your 20s. I'm like, that's really true. How old were you when you had your first?
I was 32,
Okay.
32. So I mean, and I even like for the place I grew up, everybody had their kids in their 20s. So
Of course.
for me, I felt like I was even like an older mom because
Yeah, you're like a grandma.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then like Harlow came when I was 30. I turned 34 like a month after she came. So, early 30s,
Oh,
mid 30s.
well, they say the doctors say you're at 35, over 35, you're a geriatric pregnancy.
Wait
Do
a
you know that?
second. I'm a total liar. I had Harlow at 35.
So you were a geriatric,
Yes,
a
and then I turned
geriatric.
36 right after her.
Oh yeah, so you were legit
Yep.
geriatric
Oh
pregnancy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Old
It's a
grandma
lovely word they throw at you.
I
It's
mean, can you believe it? It's so stupid. What? But I mean, it's like I just think it's like there is such a different experience. Like I again, I if I had my druthers when I was much younger, I would have been a mom at a very young age. I would have wanted to be like a mom out of college, like marry my college sweetheart, have multiple kids. Like that was what I thought I was gonna do. And oh, how life, best laid plans, and
yeah.
I'm so glad. But I think there's something to be said for also just knowing that there is a lot of empowerment in being a single mom,
Mhm.
in the sense that you do like I am like in charge, which is very empowering as a woman to be in charge of your life completely.
Yeah.
Like, obviously I can't control everything, much to my chagrin, but I can I am like, this is my domain, and I'm only having to take care of a child. And look, I just got a rescue dog. I have two other dogs. A lot of people would think, if I were married, do you think my husband would be okay with me getting all these animals? No way. Like my friends who are married, their husbands are like, you cannot have another dog. And I'm like, what? You just go get your other dog. I can't just go get another dog. Like, but why? It's your house. You can do it. No, I have to ask him. I'm like, oh, fuck that. No way. I get as many animals as I want. I can have more kids if I want. Like
Yeah.
I choose everything. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, it is kind of true, right?
Mhm.
There isn't another like gatekeeper, right? So it's like, okay.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh my God. Of course. Of course. Absolutely. I just like it's so funny talking to you. I'm like, wait. And then I remembered a lot of stuff that I just totally forgot about. So it's nice. You're just like refreshing my memory about my life that I forgot about. I'm like, oh yeah, that did happen. Oh yeah. It's fun to talk about those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aw. Well, thank you, girl.
Yeah. Wow. That interview totally caught me off guard. I thought I was getting when she said she doesn't know how we do it with partners. And I was just like, wow, I never thought of that. Having children does take a toll on your relationship. And that is a whole other aspect that you have to pay attention to. And it just made something click in my head. I just thought that was so cool. And I wanna thank her so much for being on my show. Single mothers are superheroes. Superheroes. No matter what way you get there, I just am in awe by the strength you have, by the power you have. You are an unstoppable beings. And I wanna thank my friend so much again for sharing her story. It was inspirational in ways that I never thought it would have been. Like I said, I don't mean that to sound mean, it's just caught me so off guard, but it was so beautiful. I loved it so much. I hope that everyone can take something home from this and just appreciate it as much as I did. Thank you so much for listening. If you have a story that you would like to share, hit me up. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on TikTok, and I have YouTube Shorts now. I don't know if that's a separate platform than YouTube. I am not that savvy. However, find me. Find me, message me. Hey, Jackie, I have a story to tell. Hey, Jackie, this is interesting. We should talk about it. I would love all of your suggestions. Thank you so much for listening to the Mama Jack podcast. I'll see you next week.